After several hours of uncertainty as a result of the minority issuing threats to make things difficult for the ruling NDC government, the debate on the 2016 budget started today. Yesterday, the issue of a quorum made it impossible for the budget debate to commence, but members started the debate, and as typical of them, with a back and forth between minority and majority. The minority this time went a step further to point out errors in the document, claiming it has no reason to applaud government for such abysmal economic performance.
The cost of living is going so high up that if you go to churches, collection is going down. Even funeral donations are going down under this incompetent Mahama administration. Mr. Speaker, interest rates, 91-day Treasury bill rate, 25.2%, 182-day, 25.9%. Now, if the government itself is borrowing at 25%, what do you expect the ordinary Ghanaian to get? Average lending rates are above 30%. Now, a day after the budget was read, the Bank of Ghana revised the monetary policy rate to 26%. What it means is that this 25% I'm talking about will not pertain today. So lending rates are also skyrocketing. Where did we go wrong? A toxic mix, Mr. Speaker, of incompetence and mismanagement. Mr. Speaker, exchange rate. Last year, our currency depreciated by 31.2%. This year, 15.5%. The CD is the worst performing currency in Africa. Yes. So, in total, Mr. Speaker, look at the scenario that confronts the Ghanaian businessman. The Ghanaian businessman, to start with, cannot access credit. If he gets credit, he is borrowing at 35%. Yes. He wants to go import goods. He's exchanging the currency at 4 cedis to the dollar. Now, when he brings his goods to the port, he pays all manner of import duties imposed by this government. Yeah. When he gets his wares to the shop, then the almighty doom saw is waiting for him. So what happens? He has to buy fuel, which is the most expensive in the south region, to power his generator. Mr. Speaker, where did we go wrong? A toxic mix of incompetence and mismanagement. Mr. Speaker, the fiscal deficit. Between 2001 and 2008, the average fiscal deficit was 4.4%. In the last 7 years, the fiscal deficit has averaged 8.1%. As a matter of fact, in 2012, 2013, and 2014, we had successive years of double-digit fiscal deficit, unprecedented in this country. Mr. Speaker, so we ran to the IMF that they should come help us with our fiscal consolidation efforts. Even under the IMF, 2015 fiscal deficit is 7.3%. 2008 under MPP and Kufo, it was 6.5%.
They said you hadn't heard from before.
Yes, they said it was unprecedented. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Ghana has gone to the sub-region ECOWAS, and we have a rationalized macroeconomic convergence criteria to steer us all to a common currency in 2020. Now, there are a set of criteria that every country is supposed to meet. Budget deficit of less than 3%, we failed. Yes. Average annual inflation of less than 10%, we failed.
I remember you have 10 more minutes.
Cost reserves greater than 3 months import cover, we failed. Central bank financing of budget deficit less than 10% of tax revenue, we failed. Public debt to GDP ratio less than 70%, we failed. Nominal exchange rate variation of 10%, we failed over there. We've accumulated too much debt, Mr. Speaker. Now, I hope somebody will translate this message to the president. The debt at the end of 2008 was 9.5 billion Ghana cedis. The debt at the end of 2008, 9.5 billion Ghana cedis. Now, guess what? The debt as of today, 97 billion Ghana cedis. Mr. Speaker, the debt of 9.5 billion Ghana cedis of 2008 was not accumulated by the MPP. It was 51 years of debt. So the debt from Nkrumah, all through military regimes, through Buzia, Rawlings, Kufo, we ended at 9.5 billion Ghana cedis. Today, under the NDC, 97 billion Ghana cedis. Now, Mr. Speaker, if I share the 97 billion Ghana cedis among the 27 million Ghanaians, conservative, each Ghanaian owes 3,592 Ghana cedis. The MPP, the first Eurobond, the yield was 8.5%. Even then, there was a global credit crunch, and we had a yield of 8.5%. Mr. Speaker, what is worrying? What is worrying about this yield that we paid on the Eurobond is that we paid 10.75. The minister says in paragraph 133 that the Eurobond is to be used to refinance maturing short-term debt. Mr. Speaker, you borrow at 10.75 dollar rate. If you
remember, you have 5 minutes to go.
Very well, Mr. Speaker. You add the inflation rate, so the foreign yield plus the inflation rate, that will give you the domestic interest rate. So if I add 10.75 to the inflation rate of about 17.5, it is giving me 28.5%. Now I'm borrowing at 28.5% to come and refinance a short-term debt which sells at 25%. It's like going to a microfinance, borrowing money and going to pay off your. What is sad is that the government still benefits from HIPIC. But they will not tell you. Absolutely. They hide behind SIS. It is HIPIC. It is HIPIC. And we are HIPIC today. Had it not been for Kufuor, who moved us from a poor country to a lower middle income country, we would be HIPIC today. Yes. We are HIPIC. Except that we are now a lower middle income country. So it will be a highly indebted lower middle income country. Helmic. That's what we are today. This budget presented.
But the majority side of Parliament disagrees.
You had a target for 4%, you ended up 15%, a slippage of 11 percentage points. That has never happened in the history of Ghana. That's historical. And I'm saying, Mr. President, I say, Mr. Speaker, that in spite of the difficulties we've had over the last 3 years, we're glad that we do not have a situation where, in spite of these difficulties, inflation has crossed 18%. We've not had it, despite these difficulties. Inflation did not go at 18% during their time. It actually inched up all the way to 21% before our consolidation, our policies restored inflation, took it all the way down to single digits. I'm saying that in spite of all these difficulties we've gone through, we've not reached the unprecedented level that it reached in the year 2008. Mr. Speaker, let me admit that in running every economy all over the world, there are definite periods where you go through vicissitudes. And those vicissitudes sometimes come.
I remember, you can notice when it gets your turn, you can address it. All right.
Yeah, yes, Speaker. And those vicissitudes come on the back of sometimes external difficulties. Our good friends point to the difficulties the agricultural sector has as far as our statistics this year go. And that is true. The agricultural sector this year, especially the crop subsector, did not perform as well. And these are largely as a result of weather difficulties. In fact, I would say that if it were not for the resilience of the current agricultural performance we have, we would have had the very unfortunate situation that we saw in 2007 under their good selves, where agricultural sector contracted by negative 1.7%, which actually makes the 0.4% we have today absolutely a much better situation. Now, so I mean, it's rather ironic that people who actually have overseen agricultural contraction by as much as 1.7% would even have the audacity to want to talk about 0.04%. Mr. Speaker, I want to also explain that if we take a look at issues relating to high cost of doing business, issues relating to high cost of living and employment and so on, these things happen on the back of consistent stability in the economy. What this economy has gone through over the last 3 years has been a path that, for example, was caused by huge expenditures. Those expenditures came as a result of demand that were made by the good people of Ghana. Demand, for example, that came for public sector workers. That led to an increase in public sector wage from around 2.5 billion to over 8 billion. That's unprecedented in our history. But we had to manage the situation for the sake of the good people of Ghana. You don't call that consumption. You call that an investment for stability. That's really what it was. As a country, we've been able to make a step gradually back into a position where waste as a percentage of GDP or as a percentage of expenditure is coming back into the levels that it ought to be. We need to also appreciate that the fact, for example, that we do not have, let's say, the 14.4% growth that we had, for example, in 2008, does not mean that this economy is in a debilitating situation. No. There's no economy in the world that can continually pose 11 or 14% every single year. In fact, even in China or even in India, you'll notice that despite the fact that they are still growing, their growth levels have seen some reduction. That simply is a normal order. Anyone who is observing this economy today does know that regardless of the difficulty we've had over the last couple of years, we are again entering into a period of high growth again. And the high growth period that is coming is anchored on the stability that we are having today. Now, it's also ironic to listen to our friends on the other side, the same group of people who, anytime government takes a decision to want to remove subsidies or to reduce them, they are the first people to shout against anything that have to do with removal of subsidy. But they've forgotten that the continued what you call having of subsidy in our budget creates situations where you have to be spending not on capital expenditure, but on things that are not non-capital. So we need to have across the divide a unanimity to agree that there are things that we need to do together in order to grow our economy. And those that have to do with investment into capital expenditure and so on. Mr. Speaker, let me talk a little bit about debt. I've heard again and again the whole issue about debt being unsustainable, debt being high. The word is not debt, it's called investment. That's really what it is. It's an investment into the future of our country. When you build roads like we have seen, unprecedented levels of road across every region of this country, it's called an investment into road infrastructure. It's not debt. If you were taking that up and eating it, you can call it debt because you are not able to produce, to pay back. But if you invest into infrastructure, you clearly are going to have that return, not just in terms of economic growth, but also in terms of economic opportunity, by way of employment and opportunities for our people. So instead of talking about debt, they should rather be joining us to talk about investment. All over their constituencies, wherever they go as MPs, the people of Ghana clamor for investment. Investment in water, investment in schools, investment in roads, investment in electricity. And that is what it is they should join us to say. Instead of talking about that, come to the new age where it's no more about that, it's now about investment.
But more seriously, our errors pointed out in the 2016 budget, which the minority says will make things difficult if not corrected.
If you check both the old version of the budget and the new version of the budget, there are tables that are to reflect here, particularly what the minister has laid. Because this is the Bible, this is the authentic Bible we have now. Unless the minister withdraws it and lays a new one. This is the only authentic Bible we should have, or authentic budget we have. But Mr. Speaker, when you go to page, I'm using page because it corresponds with what is in the budget. That's why I'm not using the word column. I'm using page 199, Mr. Speaker. It is blank. But when you go to both the old version and the new version, there are tables.
So which one?
As I said, I don't know the table to use.
Which one?
Mr. Speaker, when you go to page, when you go to page 210,
big as 200.
Mr. Speaker, when you go to page 210, Mr. Speaker, it is blank. And now that we have two tables. So I really don't know whether the old table, the figures there, or the new table are correct. Because in each of the tables, one does not have figures, the other has figures. But it's not in the hazard to correspond. Mr. Speaker, when you go to page 218, the official one is blank. But when you go to this, there are two tables. One of them, the figures are not there. The second one, the figures
Honorable
are there.
Deputy Minority Leader.
Which one?
Honorable Deputy Minority.
the document is not the document that is presented. What we really want is to get a true and accurate record of what we are going to debate. That's all. So there's not much of a difficulty. I would suggest, if the House would agree with me, that probably the ranking member and the Deputy Finance Minister put their heads together looking at the figures, and if there's any transposition, we do it so that we know that this is the record that we are going to debate.
Let's do some analysis now, and economist John Gachi is here with me in the studio to do some analysis. Many thanks for your time on today's Big Story. You've listened to the minority, and they raise issues of CD depreciation, interest rates. They raise issue the recent Eurobond that we signed, and more worrying is the fact or a debt of 97 billion we're currently having. What do you make of all these concerns?
Well, I think those concerns are real, because the minority didn't come by those figures. They were produced by the government. That shows, on the other hand, that the government is also trying to disclose the reality about the economy to us. What I think we should do going forward is to assess the various prescriptions in the budget to address those pertinent issues of the country, and not necessarily comparing the time that the MPP was in government to the time that the NDC is in government. Because if you go into that, there are issues that one will raise, and that will actually defeat the purpose of the budget.
And we, the ordinary Ghanaians, will be the ones who will suffer at the end of the day.
You cannot compare a period where you have HIPIC initiative with HIPIC relief and then multilateral relief packages to support your activities.
Right.
And then after the IMF left within 1 year, we were looking for money to borrow around the world. We couldn't get that. At the time that we had redenomination of the currency and all those things. So if you compare that period with the period in which we are now, then you allow yourself to go into unnecessary debate. So that is where I think we should pick on the measures in the budget to see whether they have some solution for the country.
But you are an optimistic, and I think that it's encouraging. But seriously, things are not funny anymore. Even the energy crisis, for instance, that we had the hope of ending by end of this year, which is exactly next month, I think our hope is diminishing. And so you think government has provided enough, let me say, measures in the budget to address all these challenges?
Well, all that the people of Ghana need, businesses, individuals need, is to see this power crisis over. But you cannot do this within a short period of time. You need investment. Some of the investment have lifespan to become fruitful. And hopefully, we have been given opportunity by the close of this year. We are going to assess whether some of this investment will become fruitful to reduce the level of power challenges we have in the country. I believe to overcome all these problems, we should rather be talking about the medium term, because most of the pipeline of projects that has the possibility of solving the problem in the energy sector will become fruitful in the medium term. Right. But there are some that will become fruitful by the close of the year, and I believe when those things do happen, the power problem will go down significantly.
Let's do more analysis and go on to the phone lines, where we have James Kluche-Aveji. He's chairman of Finance Committee of Parliament. And good evening. You're welcome on today's Big Story.
Good evening, and good evening to your listeners.
Honorable, let's take the concerns of the minority one after the other. First, the discrepancies in the documents presented to members, and the latest one, which was to replace it. What was responsible for all the errors, and in some instances, blank tables, where there was table in one document and other document there was blank, I mean, which suddenly have figures and all of that? I mean, what accounted for these errors?
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I just want to register the fact that the document presented by the Minister of Finance has no discrepancy. what really happened was that there are two different issues that happening at the same time. So I need to take your time to go through them. The document presented by the Minister of Finance on the 13th of November 2015 was the original authentic document. Now that document, when the Hausa Department of Parliament was reproducing that document in our official report, they left out some pages which were actually tables. So it does not mean that the document itself has some pages missing. No. It is the Hausa Department that made that mistake for not producing or reproducing some of the pages of the original document. That is one side. The second side was that when the document was read by the Minister of Finance, it had to be printed by the government printer, which is the Assembly Press. In printing the document, they made a mistake by some of the tables. Because they used Excel, the spaces were too close, and therefore the numbers could not be contained in those spaces, and the numbers shrink, and therefore produce a result of what we call XXX. You cannot read the numbers. So those were also detected by the Ministry of Finance after the printing of the document and after the document had been distributed to members. So when this detection was made, the ministry went back to Assembly Press to reprint another one by expanding the spaces to accommodate the numbers. That was what the ministry brought to replace the earlier one, which has that problem.
So how did the House finally agree, on the way forward?
Finally, the House agreed that the mistake that Honorable Mitu brought about, or the problem that he brought about, was the mistake of the Hausa Department. So the Speaker directed that the Hausa capture the documents presented by the Minister of Finance fully. Those pages that were not captured, the Hausa should do that correction. And that was why we agreed and the debate started today.
Well, many thanks to you, Mr. James Kluche Aveji. He's chairman of Parliament's Finance Committee. Mr. Gachi, tell me, did the budget, the document, I'm sure you've been following as the minister presented to the House. I don't know if you have a copy yet, but did it meet your expectation as economist?
Well, I think we need to put this issue of expectation or hope in context.
Right.
We know that our country has been going through different challenges, be it energy, the macroeconomic distortions. So if you need to talk about hope, then we should see whether the budget is addressing those issues.
Right.
I have seen in the budget significant programs, some of which should actually become fruitful at the end of this year, solving the energy problem.
Okay.
That gives hope.
Okay.
We want to reduce budget deficit, because if you don't do that, it has problem for the country, the outlook of the country, etc., will be affected. There are clear programs in the budget to address the deficit.
Okay.
We also need to increase mobilization of revenue.
Right.
It is also very clear that in 2015, revenue mobilization has gone up significantly to around 24.1% of GDP.
How can we manage expenditure, especially in 2016?
Yeah, but we also do know there are a lot of problems in revenue mobilization.
Okay.
So there are also clear programs, especially automation and putting electronic platform into revenue mobilization. Okay. Those are clear, bold steps that we have been talking about over the years. Okay. So when I look at it from that perspective, I believe there are things in the budget addressing the pertinent problems that we have in the country. Okay. What is needful is how members of parliament, especially the minority side, civil society group, analysts in the country, the media, to ensure that they put government under on its toes to ensure that they are committed to implementing the program they have outlined, to ensure that we all benefit from the good program they put in the budget. Right. So to that extent, I would say the budget has hope.
It has hope, and not a budget of no hope, as the minority term it. Many thanks to you, Mr. Gachi, for passing through. Been talking about the 2016 budget, which was presented by Finance Minister Setape, and that Parliament has started debate. There were some issues here and there that prevented it from being debated upon, but those problems were told by Chairman of Finance Committee that they've been resolved and that the debate will continue. My name is Aisha Ibrahim, and this is today's big story.